All right, guys. So this should look familiar. This is where we left off in the last video. I strongly encourage that you watch these videos in order, or you're going to get lost really quickly. And what we're going to do today is, or in this video, we're going to finish the conditional formatting of this table. Maybe we'll add some group averages. Group is identified here. For these students, this is their cohort of interest, or the cohort that they'd like to work with. But you could think of this as, from a sports science perspective, these could be athletes and this could be their positions. So maybe we'll display the position averages down here. Then I'm going to add slicers, which are another way of filtering the data. Right now, we can do some cool things with data aggregation with the dates, but we might want to filter the data or just show a select few code names or athletes or a select few groups at a time. So that's what we're going to do today. And in a previous video, we grouped various things together that we don't see right now. This table is pretty succinct, but what we did is we added averages and standard deviations as columns for all these metrics. And this is going to get overwhelming really fast. And I'm going to click the number 1 or number 2 here, and everything's going to open up. So for stress for this person, we have their average and their standard deviation. Now, for me, there are 2 reasons why these are in here. Number 1, as a sports scientist or as a practitioner, I may want to see these things. It may help me do my job better. And secondly, we can use these values for conditional formatting. For example, what we're going to do is if stress is greater than 1 standard deviation above the average, which is using these 2 values, then we'll color it a certain way. Or if it's less than 1 standard deviation below the average, then we'll color code it a different way. Now, there's one thing that I notice, and that's that the standard deviations appear to be really high. And this brings 2 important concepts into play. Number 1 is you need to understand your data set. If you don't, you're in big trouble. I understand this data set. I know what the values probably should be, give or take, given the scale that it's on. And I know what looks abnormal and what doesn't. Secondly, you should continuously check your data to make sure it's right. And I think I know why these standard deviations are high, and it's because I did not accommodate for values that are blank in that stress column in my data set. For example, let's sort this, or it's already sorted, smallest to largest. Scroll down to the bottom here. There are a bunch of blank values for when people aren't here or they did not fill in their data. So I need to accommodate for that when doing the standard deviations. And the way that I do that, right now I'm telling Excel, is take the standard deviation if the code name in the table, the data entry table, is equal to that person's name, and the academic year in the data entry table is equal to this academic year. And now I'm going to tell it, and if table daily stress, if the stress in that table is not equal to blank, then, or take the standard deviation of the stress value. Or let me just do that. Let me go back once. So notice this number 3 here. It doesn't have the formula applied. I'm going to apply this formula to it. Where was the 3? Was it here? Let me try that again. Yep, right here, row 12, 3. When I apply the formula to it, it turns into a 1.7. So that worked. And now these standard deviations look a lot better. They look accurate to me. So the first thing that I have to do is I need to apply this standard deviation criteria to my other standard deviations that I calculated because I screwed up with all of them. And the quickest way to do that, I believe, is to use copying and pasting and find and replace. So I'm going to copy the standard deviation here, paste it in the sleep quality standard deviation column, find, replace. I want to replace stress with sleep quality. And now that should, all the criteria remains the same, except I'm replacing the metric. And that works. And why did I type in sleep quality as one word? It's because when we're making these exchanges, we're referring to this table. I know the column headers in my table, most of them. So I replaced this stress column with this sleep quality column, which is one word. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other items in this table within this visualization. So let's take this stress and let's paste it in the energy. Let's paste it in the readiness score, SD, standard deviation, in the RPE. We'll paste it in the duration, SRPE, and the grades. Now you may want to skip through this, and that's fine. I'm just going to replace stress, this time with energy. I'm going to replace stress with readiness score now. Replace stress. This is not called RPE in my database. It's called latest RPE, I believe. So that's what I'm going to replace it with. Again, this is duration, and I'll show you what happens. It's called latest duration in my database. So if I try to replace stress with duration, it's going to give me an error because it can't find the duration column in the table daily, which is my database. So I need to replace it with what its column header is in the database, which is latest duration. I'll do this, SRP. And I think this is called grades. G-R-A-D-E-S. Great. So you're going to see all these green arrows everywhere. The quickest way to get rid of them, for me at least, is they're not actually errors. So I'm just going to paste the formula down, drag this across, and move it up. All the green arrows should go away. Okay. So now we have accurate standard deviations, and I have a sense that the averages are accurate. When all this is said and done, I'm going to double check everything. But I just happened to quickly notice the standard deviations being off, so might as well correct them now. So now let's apply the conditional formatting logic. And this is really busy right now. So I'm just going to close everything and just open the ones for stress. Because we're going to do this in a way where we're going to be able to copy and paste the conditional formatting that we apply to stress to most of the other metrics. And we're actually, the logic is going to remain the same. And you can do this any way that you want. But I'm going to do stress is greater than one standard deviation above the average or the mean as being green. Stress is below one standard deviation or less than one standard deviation below the average as being red. And that's because with stress, sleep quality, and energy, higher is better. So for stress, sleep quality, energy, readiness score, and grade, I'm going to apply that logic, and I'm going to do the inverse for SRP, duration, and RP. That's what's kind of traditionally done. I'm just gonna do it that way for now, and we can always change it. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to do a new rule: format only cells that contain a self value that is greater than, we have the data right here, that is greater than the average. And quick note here, or two notes actually, with putting formulas in here. Whenever you select a cell, Excel is automatically going to lock it with these dollar signs. If I let this be and I try to apply, copy and paste this conditional formatting to other cells, it's going to keep on referring to this stress average cell, stress average column, and row, because they're both locked. So that's not going to work. If I try to apply this to sleep quality, it's going to be looking at these values. So the first thing that we do is we remove the dollar signs if we're going to do this. The second thing that I want to point out is I keep on clicking in this box, because if you use the arrows, like for example, let's say that I'm on the M, or I'm next to the M and I want to get to the right of the 8. If I click right arrow, Excel is going to it's going to do weird stuff. It's going to move the cell over, and if I do another arrow, it's going to move the cell over again. So all I'm trying to say here is do not use arrows or the keyboard when you're doing these conditional formatting rules, or else things are going to get screwed up. So let me just try this again. So we're doing the stress average plus standard deviation. And we're using 1 standard deviation. If you want to make this 2 or 1.5 or whatnot, you can put a parenthesis around here and say times 1.5 would be, now we're going to format the cell if it's 1.5 standard deviations or more above the mean. But we're just using 1. So that's what it's going to look like. And what do I want it to look like? I'm going to make it nice and bold and green, the same green that I'm using throughout this dashboard. I'm going to click OK. All right, that is. And we can quickly, another good reason why having averages and standard deviations or other information within your table that you might not necessarily display is because I can quickly see 6.3 plus 1.4 is 7.7, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. And their value for this day is 8. They're feeling less stressed. I know it is counterintuitive than normal. Next rule is format cells that contain cell value less than, and we're going to do the same thing but opposite. So the average minus the standard deviation and we will make that red and bold. But again, I really like consistency. I want to use this red because that's what I used before. If I go to manage rules here, I should be able to see what I used before. And a way to make the colors the same is just know what the color code is. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. I'm going to look, and if you go to more colors, you can see it. 2559797 is the RGB color code. So in this formula here, I'm going to go to more colors and go 9797. Now it's the same color as this one. And last rule, and I typically do this with almost anything that I'm conditional formatting, is thinking about blanks. For example, if I apply this formula to these blanks, they're probably going to get color coded in some way. We can test it right now. If I apply this formatting, all right, all these are green. Maybe I don't want them to be green. Maybe I just don't want them to show anything. So I just undid that. I'm going to do a new rule. Excel has a lot of different options here. I'm just going to say, instead of cell value being between something, I'm just going to say blanks. And I'm going to keep it at no format set because I don't want anything to happen to those blank cells. Okay. If I go to manage rules, right now this is looking at all the rules for the table. But if I look at the rules for the current selection, which is just this cell, I see that there are 3 rules applied. And one thing that I want to do is I want to stop if true here, because what that's saying is if there is a blank cell, apply this logic, apply this formatting, and then just stop. Like don't worry about anything else. And that would be appropriate in this context. Now I'm going to paste all this, paste the formatting down. My cells stay blank, and it looks like, let's just confirm, 6.9 minus 0.8 is 6.1. That is below. 7.4 plus 0.5, 7.9, that is above. Okay, great. It looks like this is working. Again, I like consistency, so what's gonna happen, oh, they all do say L8 to L39. All right, perfect. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy and paste this formatting. Well, maybe I can hide the standard deviations and averages for now. I'm gonna copy this, paste it to the sleep quality. I'm gonna paste it to the energy. Holy cow, what is going on this day? It's a lot of stuff. And I'm going to paste it to the readiness score. Holy moly. All right, so, and then I'm also going to paste it to the grades. All right, let's just confirm with one of these things to make sure that they're looking at the right cells. Let's do energy because there's a lot of red there. The average energy for this person is 5.5. 5.5 minus 1.2, 4.3. They are less than 4.3. Same thing here. It looks like it's, yeah, at a glance, it looks like it's working. Okay, great. Now, you know what? I'm actually just going to copy and paste the same conditional formatting to the RPEs, or the RPE duration SRP. But what I'm going to do now is after I apply that, I'm going to manage the rules. I'm going to go to the selection, and I'm just going to invert this. So this now has to be green. So when it's less than 1 standard deviation below the average, it's green. When it's greater than 1 standard deviation above the average, it's going to be that red color. Oh man, luckily I think I remember it. I think it's 2559797. Okay, apply that. Let's do that with the duration. And let's do that with the SRPE. All right. Great. So now we have a lot of conditional formatting going on here, and it looks like there's a lot of stuff highlighted on this day. I'd have to look at the data a little bit more to understand whether or not 1 standard deviation is appropriate or not. Maybe I bump it up to 1.5 or maybe 2, but an easy way, I mean, we can do that relatively quickly if we want to. So the next thing is let's add some slicers just to show you what they do. If you click on the table anywhere, go to Insert, Slicer, and now it'll pull up everything in this table, and you can filter by anything you want. I'm going to do groups in codename. And you know what? No, I'm not going to do interstatus. And what's going to happen is you're going to have 2 little filter things pop up here. And we'll reorganize all this and make sure it looks pretty. Slicers have options. Like right now, it's everything in one column. But if I wanted to, for example, on this slicer that says codename, I could say make it up here, make it 2 columns. Pretty much you have a bunch of ways, similar to the tables, a bunch of ways to design it differently. Like if I want to change the colors or whatever I want to do, might as well just make both these gray to line up with this. And yeah, so we'll go through that in a couple videos from now when we're ready to organize things. But we have slicers, and if you click on anything, like for example, I'm going to click on athletes. Now what that does is it automatically filters my table down to just the people with the group that is athletes. And maybe I want to just look at this person or these 4 people. And that's how slicers work. They're just filters. Now, the last thing I want to do in this video is just throw in some group averages. So the first thing to do is understand how many groups we have. A quick way to do that is we can look at this, and actually I need to change one thing. It says kids, but I'm going to my table that this information is coming from. It's my profile table, which you may end up having with height, weight, phone number, email address, or position, various things. I'm going to change this kids to youth, so everything's consistent because kids are youth. Now I only have 4 groups. Now let's do some group averages. So athletes, gen pop, special, and youth. Let's say class average. Say youth, athletes, remember, special and gen pop, special. And now we have a couple ways of going about this. I'm not going to worry about these things right now. I need to think a little bit more about how I want to relay aggregate of that information on average for these people. But for stress, sleep quality, and these items here, we can just take we have a couple options. We can either use this table and get aggregates from this table, or we can go back to our database and get aggregates from there, just like we did to display in this table. I prefer the latter to keep everything consistent. It could get annoying if you wanted to change something holistically and you were using this table to pull information into these averages, but with this table, you're pulling information from this table. It gets a little complicated and annoying. So for me, the quickest way to do this is I'm going to copy this. This works the way that I want it to already. And just for a little refresher, we accommodated for a bunch of things in this. For example, if the past X number of days is blank, just use this date and take the value for this date. Or if we enter in a number of days into that cell, then aggregate the information for the past that number of days relative to that date. So I'm going to take this formula. Oops. Oh, I do not know what I just clicked on, but things are spinning. That's not good. All right, let's do that again. Copy that, paste it down to youth. But right now we're taking the average of stress. If the date is equal to that date, all of that logic is fine. The only issue that we have here is that we're also looking at code names in this logic. Now, instead of code names, we want to look at the group. So we have a couple of options of doing this. So I'm going to change this. So take the average of stress if the date is equal to this date and the code name, but instead of code name, I want the table, daily. Do I have groups? What's it called? I called it something. Cohort of interest is equal to not at code name. Now we have a couple options. I'm in the youth column, I think, so I could either do quotes youth. That would work. Or what I can do, I can refer to this cell right here. So if the cohort of interest is equal to whatever's in this cell, and I'm going to lock, if I am going to do it this way, I'm going to lock the column. I'm going to lock the column just in case I drag it anywhere. And now I just need to do it to the one below too. So table daily cohort of interest is equal to A42. And I'm going to click enter. And now I should have the average for the youth. And a nice thing about this is I locked the column, but I did not lock the row. So I could drag this down, and I hope that it'll apply to each of these populations. The one caveat to this is whatever is typed in the cell has to be exactly the same as the way that it's typed pretty much in your table or wherever that's coming from. So it has to be exactly the same as the way it's typed here, or you may not want to use this strategy. I'm going to use it for now. Let's drag this down. And now it should say cohort of interest is equal to A43, good athletes. The next one, A44, Gen Pop. Perfect. Then the class average, we could just do the same thing, paste the same formula, just remove the cohort of interest because it's irrelevant now. So I'm removing the cohort of interest criteria. That's a total class average. Let's just clean this up a little bit. Let's make it a number value. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the standard deviation stuff, where I'm going to paste this. I'm going to copy it and paste it in each of these columns and just replace and do a find replace with stress for stress with sleep quality, energy, etc. So I'm going to copy this, paste it in, find, replace, stress, sleep quality. And I'm just gonna do this for everyone because it's quicker this way if this box stays up. So now Stress is going to be energy. And then the next one is going to be readiness score. RPE, duration. So then I'm going to do this for, I think I called it latest RPE in my database. The latest duration. And what do we have here? SRP and grades. All right, so let's do SRP and grades. All right, perfect. So now I have class averages and all these different cohort, I guess, averages, and you can make it look nice by, I don't know, just gonna just do every other, put it in a nice little box, maybe. Maybe make this white, or something different. We'll add spacing and stuff. I typically don't do this stuff until the very end, the formatting of things until the very end, because things move around so much. Like, for example, I'll probably end up merging some things together, and then if I want to move them around, it gets more difficult. So I'm going to save all the formatting stuff until the end. Right now, we have all of our data. We have it conditionally formatted in a way that makes sense to me, might make sense to you, or it might not. Still might play around with the standard deviation stuff. And let's go back to our plan, because we made a plan. So far, we're looking okay, right? We have the class attendance, injury status. We don't have any text logic yet. That's fine. That'll happen at the very end if it happens at all. And class wellness, we have all this stuff. We have our filters, right? We have our slicer for athletes. We have our group filter. We have our date picker. We have our past X days selector. We have our table. We don't have any headers for the table yet, but that's okay. We'll do that at the end. And the next thing on our list is a graph where we can pick the load type. Like, for example, do we want to look at SRP over time versus RPE versus duration? And we have a wellness picker where do we want to look at sleep quality versus energy versus readiness score overall. And I don't know about this group picker yet. I need to think a little bit more about that if I want to include it. But in any case, we're going to have a graph down here too. And that's what we'll go over mostly in the next video. Thanks for watching.